Hi, my name is Michah Fey. I've been in the area here for about 18 years now. I started fishing when I was about 2 years old. Mostly did a lot of trout and salmon fishing. Moved down to Utah when I was 8 from Idaho, and been hooked on bass fishing ever since. Fishing in general is great, but my main passion is bass fishing, especially since we have such great local lakes here. We've got 3 blue ribbon bass fisheries here in the county, Gunlock, Quail, and Sand Hollow State Park. Today we're out at Quail. It's late April. We're fishing. It's about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. What we're using today is this worm here. This is a 6-inch robo worm. I've really liked these a lot. I've caught a lot of fish on these when nothing else will catch them. Rigged the same way, except for the weight is attached to the hook, and it doesn't really seem to make too much of a difference. But this just helps me control the action of the worm a little bit better when everything's attached. I like to use the Palomar knot, but whatever you want to use is just as good. Make sure you wet your line before you slide it down though. It tends to keep a line from rubbing on itself. And same thing, just slide it in the end of the worm, poke it out the bottom, slide it up, turn it around, and it locks in right here so it doesn't slide off. And then I always pull it out and grab just behind where the hook starts to turn, push it all the way through, and they call this skin hooking. Just pull the worm up and let it slide back just under the surface of the worm, and that keeps it from getting hung up on weeds. And then same thing as the tube jig, when the fish bites it, pushes it down, exposes the hook point. And as long as they get that part of the hook in their mouth, then it works. Basically what I'm doing down here is just kind of flipping as close to the trees as I can. It's been a real sunny day today. The fish are sitting up underneath the cover about as deep as they can get into it. Once it starts to get dark, they'll start moving around a little bit more, but for the most part they're sitting right in the cover. Weedless rig is pretty much necessity. I like to use a little bit heavier line than I got today, but with the water clarity I like a little bit lighter line, just so that your presentation's that much better. Go throw a little bit slower moving bait on here. Looks like they may be still sitting on their beds. Rig with slip weight. I try to stick to the more natural colors, the browns, greens. When we pulled up here too, I saw 4 or 5 other guys in here, so a lot of times the fishing pressure, especially in isolated areas like this, will turn the bite off for a little while, and they just need a break or a little bit of change. And if you can, a lot of times if you see a lot of guys using the same thing, use something that's totally different. And this is definitely patience fishing up here. I've come up here some nights and only caught 2 fish, but the 2 that I did catch were 6 pounds and a little over 7 pounds, so sometimes the weight's worth it. There we go, got that one. You know what I did to catch that one? Just walk along until I see one, and now that the water is warming up a little bit, they tend to get a little more active. These smaller guys are usually a whole lot easier to catch than the big ones too. There's a couple of fish been swimming back and forth right here, and a lot of times if you can get a soft enough presentation, they'll eat it. Yep. Most of the time, if you can drop it right in front of them and not make a big splash, they'll take it. It's a little bit bigger than the last one if it'll hold still. Not quite a pound. There was another one in there, about 1.5 pounds. That's kind of why I always, whether I think they're going to bite or not, I always throw it in front of them just to see, because you never know. That other one's actually still sitting there. I bet I can get him too, as long as he stays there. These little finesse worms are almost a sure thing when the fish are actually in a feeding mode. Like I said, as long as you can drop it in front of them fairly softly. There's 3 fish just sitting right there. Every one of them looks like they want it. And we're going to try something here. if I can see them and I know where they're at, this is a really slow fishing technique, but it works really good if you can see them and stay out of their view. I'm gonna bite this off. Go grab my other pole. It's got a little bit lighter line on it. I'll just tie this on here completely weightless. No weight whatsoever. This pole's got 12-pound test on it instead of 14. Tie it on there. Just the same as before. If I can get it through there. There we go. And what this does is it just sinks really slow. Without the hook, these worms actually float. With the hook, they just barely sink. And for some reason, they just can't handle it. Now, if they're still sitting there, if they're not there, they should be at least close to here. This is a little bit tougher fishing because you're basically fishing with slack line. So you can't really, they don't bite it real hard usually, they just pick it up. So you gotta watch your line because you don't feel them hit. I just let it free fall until it hits the bottom. Once it does, I'll wiggle it a few times and let it sit. Wiggle it a little bit and let it sit again. Once in a while, I'll give it one good hop. And that sometimes triggers a reaction strike. Got a little sunfish coming up to eat it. There's a bass trying to eat it. Come on. Got him.
Nice, dude.
They're all about the same size. Oh, if I can get a hold of him here. Not big fish, but they're decent. At least we're catching something. That was a little bit weird. I actually had some moss stuck to my line. I didn't think he would hit it, but he decided he wanted it anyway. We'll let him go and see if we can't get that bigger one in there. These worms are pretty soft too, so what you want to do is they'll start splitting and coming off the end of your hook. I usually just take them and bite it off. Stick it back in my pocket, in my backpack or wherever, and then just re-thread it just like as before. Slide it to the end of the point of the hook. Slide it up to the eye. I like to try and keep the eye and the knot inside the hook. That just makes a little bit less for the fish to see. And then skin hook it just in case you get it stuck on a log or something. You don't get hung up. Let's see. Oh, there's one more sitting out there. Oh, there's a big one right there. See if he likes it. Sometimes if you drop it in front of them, they'll eat it, and sometimes they won't. Maybe we got this little guy coming after it. If they start to turn away, I usually give it a little wiggle and try and get their attention. That one turned away, but he's circling back around, which means he's not going very far. Here he comes. Nope, decided he didn't want it. This is a really hard technique if there's any wind at all though. And the lighter line you can get away with, the better. This is a little heavier than I usually use, but with the size of fish that are out here, it's worth having to deal with the little bit heavier line. There he is. See, that one I didn't feel him take it at all. I just saw my line swimming away. This is that bigger one I was looking for. I don't really want to swing him up. Okay, he's hooked good enough. He'll stay on. And that one's about a pound. 14 or 15 inches. Decent little fish. Like I said, this is one of my my go-to tricks for fish when you can see them. A lot of times it doesn't matter what time of year it is. If you can see them and they're gonna eat it all, this will work almost every time. Like I said, when the wind's blowing, you gotta kind of change it up a little bit, but almost without fail, it works great.